to send that notification. Brings me to the biannual review of closed session minutes. And I already alluded to the tape is not included in this requirement. A couple of things to be said about this. Most libraries, or most governments, sort of arbitrarily pick a couple of times a year when they're going to do this on their calendar every year. It's not absolutely required because biannual is not defined. You could probably do it in June and July, even though that doesn't seem balanced, but it would be biannual, right? Most people do something like January and June, or January and July, or June and December. You know, they pick some. Usually they're less busy months to add this to their agenda. Of all accumulated past closed session minutes. Now, the review does not mean release. You're not making the minutes public. That takes a vote of the board, and you may, let me back up. I don't know how you do or you want to do your review. Let me give you a couple examples. We have a school district that pays me, I used to do it, I'm getting a little old, about $3,000 a year to review their minutes. That's more a sign that school districts like to spend money than it is to use a lawyer for this, but that's your choice. I usually say pick the trustee who has the least to do or the most interest in serving the public, and delegate the responsibility. In other words, all 9 of you better not sit there, and I hope you have better things to do, that you don't trust one of your colleagues, or a paid employee, or a paid agent if you wish, but delegate the review task to someone, or if you want to, like the secretary minute audits, pick 2 to do it. But you're going through your collected closed session minutes, and you're reviewing them. And then when I do it, because I'm getting paid to do it, I do a memo, you know, June 1st. I've reviewed your closed session minutes, and I've reviewed volumes 1. This school happens to have about 12 volumes of these big 3-ring binders. They got all kinds of closed session minutes. And I do not recommend releasing any of them. Once in a blue moon, I might recommend releasing something. You get no awards for releasing it. No credit, no monetary awards, no pats on the back, no thank you notes. You get nothing for releasing closed session minutes. I want to start with that proposition. And you can be harmed. And I'll give you a good example that happened to some friends of mine in just a minute. But you must review. And I believe it should be delegated. Now, when the lawyers use a word like review, it's like a word summary. What does that mean? I did that for 15 years. Do I look at every page of every one of those volumes that numbers maybe 16,000 pages? Of course not, because even this school district isn't stupid enough to pay me to do that. But I've organized them in such a way that I know what's in each volume. And actually there's only 2 volumes that are really active and changed much in the last year or 2. And they're, you know, identified. They're under lock and key. But I mean, I know when I look at them, and I train my associate so he knows what he's looking at. His review takes about 2 hours at the most, and I think we're more compulsive, or whatever that word is, spending that much time. Because frankly, it would be a review if it took about 30 seconds, right? I reviewed it. I mean, that's a review. It's not maybe bona fide, so we spend a little bit more time than that, but we do not read every word of every page. That's just crazy. But whether you do it all as a group or delegate it, and I recommend delegation, you're to review twice a year. Here's what happened, and I won't tell you the name of the town. I'm sure it's still a huge embarrassment. Front page newspaper articles, a couple of them. This was and the city attorney's a great guy, and I know he never heard my speech, so I know he thought he was doing the right thing. Transparent government. There'll be a special place in heaven for him. But what happened was he goes through this closed session minutes, and he probably had a lot of them compared to a library that doesn't have many. And he sees this one about the hiring of their city manager the year before. He says, well, why not release that? He's working here. Everybody loves him. We had a closed session on personnel. You know, we had the minutes of the meeting, and why not release that? So he releases, or he recommends to the board, and they voted to release the ones he recommended to release. What's the headline the next day?
How much the city manager makes?
Improperly, illegally, I think one of the headlines, but improperly given a raise. Because at the end of that year, they had voted that he was doing such a good job and he was paid so little compared to others that he deserved a $5,000 bonus and a raise of 3% in his salary, you know, starting in January. And this was like this spring. So the paper calculated, you know, how much that money was. And of course, they had all the minutes of the meetings, and there was no public final action giving him that raise, though he was receiving the money. And that's what the whole headlines and stories were about. That the city had violated the law, had given him money he didn't, I mean, they said didn't earn and deserve. That's their judgment. But they were right that the board had not voted in public to approve that bonus that was paid and approve that raise that was paid. Now, nobody went to jail. There weren't any criminal charges filed. It wasn't evil intent. And in fact, everybody in the town probably thought he well deserved what he got and he was not getting enough. But the point is, the attorney and the review led to the release. I would never have released it. Now, you can say, Phil, you're into secret government. Well, maybe, I don't know. But the point was, they were not awarded anything for releasing public or private records into the public. They were criticized because it was, in a sense, the proof. Did they do something wrong? Sure. Yeah, they should have voted it in public. And they went back later and did vote it in public. In fact, retroactively, because he well deserved it. And probably, I think, Ray gave him even more. But that didn't stop the few headlines, you know, that really obviously hurt this attorney. He hasn't gotten over it yet because he considers it a big error on his part. I just can't pin down with him which is the bigger error, releasing it or not voting on it in public. He hasn't decided which of those is bigger. So it's a bad story. It's not a good lesson for lots of reasons, but my lesson is be careful when you release. Understand that if you bought property and that's what you discussed and the property was closed and you own it and whatever happened 6 months ago, yeah, you can probably release it because the deal's done. Or even more common, if you debated buying property and for some reason the deal fell through, it had termites. I mean, I don't know what the deal was. You didn't get financing or for whatever reason, the deal didn't follow through. I wouldn't release it real quickly. I'd want you to promise me that that deal is in the cemetery. It's never going to come back. You'll never buy it under any circumstances. It's not like the seller has a new thought now and needs the money now that he didn't need 6 months ago. You see what I mean? You got to be able to prove that the release will never come back to haunt the public, because as far as I'm concerned, you're the trustees of the public and you can't or don't want to cost them more money by having to pay more because your closed session said you would have paid up to $100,000 and he only wanted 80. Okay? I mean, those are the kinds of things that happen. You know, there's very seldom a release of personnel discussions serve anybody's purpose. You're going to either, by the way, I know you're not, I don't think you're unionized, right? But I deal with a lot of unionized, even libraries. I can tell you the first people in line to get closed session released minutes are not the newspapers, they're the unions. And if I was in their shoes, I'd be the first person in line too. Why? Because they can study your strategies. You know, we offered this, we would have done that. We wanted this, they wanted that. All of your inside information in these minutes of your closed session, if they're in any kind of detail, And I've got them that are 20 years old I'm not going to recommend releasing because it's the very same union steward, God love him, and I know he reads them because he tells me outside over a cigarette that that's what he did in the town down the street, and he's gotten a lot more from him because of it. So I know that's a strategy, and I applaud him for it. But my client's not going to release it because we're not going to invite that kind of misuse, I believe, of the taxpayers' money in our collective bargaining. So anyway, enough said about it's a biannual review, not a release. Okay, I'm getting close to the end, but I've got to tell you, this is a good lesson, I think, substantively and procedurally. The very last page of the handout is, a lot could be said about it, and you don't really need to worry about the model rules at this stage, though they are my latest draft. When I try to do a model policy, the stuff that's like on the website, and this isn't even on the website yet, I'm trying to give examples or a model, that lots of libraries could look at and edit, transfigure for their locale, for their position. And there's a lot of variance. You're what I consider to be a large library in a sophisticated metropolitan area. You're not exactly Deer Creek, Illinois, which is $15,000 a year annual budget, a town of about 300. So you're not necessarily going to have the same policy. There may be some similarities. But in any event, the models here, and you can use it or look at it any way, shape, or form you wish. At the very top of the page, though, you'll see in the event HB 5483 becomes law, and that's really what I want to talk about. HB 5483 is an example of how quick the Open Meetings Act changes, because it's amended. There's been bills, there's a dozen bills every session on Open Meetings Act, at least. Many of them go to the trash can immediately, but some of them have vitality. I've already alluded to many, that have been amendments or changes in the last year or 2 years or 3 years. So you should have gotten the idea that this is always evolving. Well, this one, 5483, is a hot topic for this reason. One, it's passed both houses of the General Assembly, and June 24th it was delivered to the alleged governor. He has, if you don't know how a bill becomes law in Illinois, he has 60 days from when it lands on his desk. Now, actually, they were typing it up probably the 21st. I don't remember the day it was voted on. It takes a while to walk it across the corridor, get it over, unlock his door, lay it on his desk. But June 24th is the key date. And 60 days from there will be next week, or Monday, I think, Saturday or Sunday. I don't really care specifically. Now, if you haven't noticed this current Governor Quinn, the one thing he does is he waits close to the 60th day, and there has to be a press conference. Now, I know the press conference wasn't today. I don't know where he's going to sign. This is hard. He can't go to a city, village, library, school district to sign this bill. He's got to go to the Press Association or the Peoria Journal-Star or the Chicago Tribune, because they're the only people that really care about this. Maybe some community organizations, BGA or such. So I'm cynical, but I have the battle scars to show you why. I think he'll sign it. He has not signed it as of today, and he's got a few days left. So this is literally hot off the press. HB 5483, my prediction is he'll sign it. Now here's what it does. It started off, and it's been played with a little bit, must have been up here someplace, because us downstairs, we don't do things like this, but someplace there must have been a government who said to their local newspaper when they asked for the minutes of the meeting, open meeting, this has nothing to do with closed meetings, open meeting, I want the minutes from that meeting, and they said, we haven't approved them yet, and we may never approve them. And I guess the press came back 6 months later and said, I want the minutes of that meeting. We haven't approved them yet. We may never approve them. So there's kind of a game, right? Some legislature had nothing better to do, and none of them have much to do anyway, decides that we need a law. We need a law that says You governments, you corrupt Illinois elected officials and appointed officials, you must approve minutes of your meetings within 30 days. Now they tinkered with the language a little bit, so the current bill says you must approve the minutes of a meeting within 30 days or the second meeting of the body, whichever's later. Now, for you guys that meet once a month, that may be, 2 months or so. We don't know what happened. I mean, there's criminal penalties under the law, so I guess theoretically, if you don't approve your minutes in that second meeting or the 30 days, they could, I don't know what they're going to do to you. If one of you just don't like the minutes because they left something out or, misspelled some names, and you can't get it approved, I'm not sure what's going to happen. All I know is this, if it becomes law, says you must approve. It then also says, and this is a bit ironic, but the current law says that your minutes approved must be released upon request, public meetings, within 7 days. Okay? And by the way, if you manage your own website, then you put your minutes on the website within 7 days of approval. Okay. This, I have no idea why, this law would move that to 10 days instead of 7. I don't know why they're giving you 3 more days. For you, they took 2 days away from you. You have to respond within 5 instead of 7. For some reason, they decided to give you 10 days instead of 7. The third change is really the one I wanted to mention, and it got added towards the end. As of tonight, as of the law up till tonight, except for the school code that has a requirement for a public comment period in a school board meeting, every other statute I know of, certainly libraries, and certainly the Open Meetings Act, has no requirement in your business meetings, the time you're devoting here and not being paid for, you are not required to have public comment periods. Now, many do, kind of as a courtesy to anyone that comes to a meeting and wants to speak, you hear them out. That's a courtesy, not required as of tonight. And the theory was, when people tried to sue for the right to public comment, the courts uniformly said, you don't have any right to public comment at the board meeting. Put it in writing and mail it to them, yeah, your right to petition. But you don't have a right, because that meeting, for which many of us are not paid, I mean, board members are not paid. You are paid at the city, not much, but schools are not paid. Your devotion of now these 2 hours is for the public's business, to conduct the public's business, to take action and vote on the public's business, not to hear people that want to come talk about, something that may be pertinent to the library or may be pertinent to Cuba. I mean, that's not the forum, that's not the purpose. Well, 5483 says, and I quote, this is the last line, says, any person, and this is an Open Meetings Act amendment, if signed into law, any person shall be permitted an opportunity to address public officials under the rules established and recorded by the public body. So for the first time, besides schools, the Open Meetings Act will require you to have a public comment period, but according to the rules you'd promulgate. So now, full circle, I'm back to my model rule. That's why, if this becomes law, I recommend that you have some kind of public rules, whether they're mine or something you moderate. I have, for instance, devoted 20 minutes limit to the topic, 3 minutes, I think it is. These vary a little bit, 4 minutes, 5 minutes per person. And there are others. I'm not a big fan of making people give you their name, address, phone number, social security number before, and write their question on a card before you let them comment. Though those are the City of Peoria rules. I mean, there are people that have such rules for public comment. Libraries by culture are, I think, more reasonable. I mean, again, you don't want to spend 3 hours at this meeting, and I apologize for the third time, for public comment periods, but that's what sort of thing that this amendment might require if it becomes law. So that's pretty much the panoply of Open Meetings Act that strikes me. I'm be happy to talk about your questions or interest areas, anything I said that provoked something, or questions you came in with.
exactly something about what constitutes a final act?
Mm-hmm.
What does constitute a final action?
Well, as I sort of alluded to earlier, it's a very hard analysis to be general about because it is so contextual, in my opinion. I think, frankly, first of all, that's why there's no definition in here. And I'm referring really to the Open Meetings Act that's in here. I think even the Attorney General, even the news media, those are the two that have formed most of the amendments the last few years, the special interest group that get their way, so to speak. They haven't even tried to define final action in the statute because it almost is undefinable in general, like a statute. It is so contextual. And even Gary and I have talked about this. It's my firm belief that final action, and I'm not a real estate lawyer anymore. I did a little bit of real estate work once upon a time, but it's my opinion and view that final action as a term, a technical term, this is not a loose term, it's not action. The statute could say all action must be in open session. It doesn't say that. It says final action, and words mean things, so we know it meant something when it said final. And in the real estate context, there's all kinds of negotiations, there's offers, there's counter offers, there's in law school, in contracts of all types, and including real estate, people are taught and try to learn when you even have a meeting of the minds. You could go through 30 evolutions of offers and counter offers back and forth before you have an offer and acceptance and a meeting of the minds. And certainly real estate's an example of that. But it's even worse in a way. As anybody that's been through a real estate transaction, I think, knows, we have this thing called a closing. In fact, there's a few beautiful works of art one of my real estate lawyers has on his wall that's a closing, in a conference table like this, and I don't know who painted it, but the closing, in fact, in the old days, and I'm probably older than Gary, and I barely remember when I started, they brought a little bit of dirt and grass. It was called season, and you couldn't have a closing unless that passed. That was the season that passed in a real estate transaction. Now, that made a lot of sense with, King Arthur or whatever, and they got away from it in the United States in probably starting in the 70s or 60s. But you have a closing, and you don't, in general, you don't own property. You may think you own it. You may want to move in. You may want to swim in the pool or whatever the property is, but you don't own it.